Welcome to Unadulterated Adultery Confessions channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching as the sun was slowly disappearing over the horizon. I was in the kitchen prepping dinner. There I was chopping ingredients, mixing sauces when George walked in. His presence felt heavier than the spices filling the room. He'd been away for a while now, and that distance brought an odd comfort, a kind of bittersweet relief. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was home from university, carrying himself with a new maturity, a more adult energy that wrapped around us both in a thick, unspoken way. He was no longer just the kid I used to tuck in at night, but a young man, strong, grounded, standing on his own. I turned to look at him, and something about the quiet look in his eyes stopped me. There was a depth there, something I couldn't quite place. He sat there watching me, his gaze, not the same as the one he'd give me over cereal years ago. I missed that old look, the one that sparkled with curiosity when he used to trail around me asking, "What's that?" while I'd make breakfast. Now that innocent curiosity was gone, replaced by something I couldn't name. We chatted over dinner about this and that, small talk to keep the atmosphere light, but each time he looked my way, I felt like his gaze was cutting right through to my thoughts, as if he could sense that strange barrier hanging between us, and that barrier held something neither of us could say out loud. After dinner, he suggested we watch an old movie, one we used to love watching together when he was little. I nodded and agreed, and in the dim light sitting there close to him, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The way he'd grown, the way he'd changed, and somewhere deep down I felt myself caught between the mom and me and some other feeling I didn't want to name. At one point he placed his hand on the edge of the couch, barely brushing mine. That's all. It was just a tiny touch, innocent enough, but something inside me flared up, and I don't know why. I pulled my hand away, feeling the tremor in my fingers, and quickly looked away, ashamed of what that simple moment stirred in me. I shouldn't feel this. I couldn't feel this. My thoughts felt like they were dragging me down. I made up some excuse about being tired and got up to go to bed, hoping a night's sleep would clear my head. The next morning, I tried to shake off that strange, unsettled feeling, distracting myself by making coffee in the kitchen. George came in looking at me with that same expression from last night, that heavy look that seemed to see too much. When he asked if I'd like to go on a walk, I hesitated, but then trying to ignore the tension growing between us wasn't working. Maybe the familiarity of our old walking path would help us get back to normal. As we walked through the trees, memories washed over me. I thought of all the stories I used to tell him, our picnics, the carefree way he used to laugh when he was a kid. But somehow all those memories only made the reality more obvious. Things were different. Now we'd both changed. We turned back toward the house as the sun dipped lower, and the walk was mostly silent except for the rustling leaves and the faint wind. By the time we got home, darkness had set in. We stepped inside quietly, almost as if both of us had run up against an invisible wall. I went to turn on the stove, the sound filling the silence while George lingered by the door. His serious expression from earlier, even more intense, now more unavoidable. When I felt his gaze on me again, I turned to face him, suddenly desperate to say something, anything that would break the silence. But I couldn't find the words. George took a step toward me, his eyes deep with something complicated that felt almost too heavy for either of us to carry. We stood like that for what felt like forever until he finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. "Mom," he said, taking a deep breath. "Sometimes I feel like I don't know, like you look at me differently, like something's changed." His words sent a jolt through me. Part of me wanted to comfort him, but another part knew we couldn't cross this line. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "George, you're my son," I said barely above a whisper. "I'm your mother." I kept saying it to myself, clinging to it like a lifeline, even though I felt something breaking inside. George looked down for a moment, then back up at me, his gaze steady. I know he said, his voice barely a whisper too. But sometimes there are things I feel that I can't shake, no matter how much I try, and just saying it out loud feels strange. I guess. I could feel the weight of his struggle, the tension in his voice, as if he were saying it just as much to himself as to me. Every part of me wanted to reach out and tell him everything would be okay, to just hold him like I used to. But we couldn't go back, and I knew it. I had to protect him from this, from both of us, so I met his gaze, trying to keep my tone firm, yet gentle. George, I said, we can't be anything else. You know that, don't you? He nodded slowly, a sad, understanding smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, he said, softly. I do. It's just hard to control how you feel. Sometimes the silence that filled the house after that was like a living thing, binding us both, leaving an indelible Alfie. For all the words we'd said and hadn't said, for all the things we felt but couldn't act on, I knew this moment would stay with us. Sometimes there are boundaries that just have to be respected, no matter what's in our hearts. As the night deepened and that silence wrapped around us, I realized some things are best left as quiet memories. When I finally make it to bed tonight, there's this rush of excitement in me that I can't shake. I lie down, try to close my eyes, but my mind's racing. George's gaze, the way he stood so close, that warmth he gives off. It's all on repeat in my head, my heart's pounding. And I can't quite explain what I'm feeling, even to myself as a mom. I shouldn't feel a pull like this, but each second I think of him, it gets harder to keep this under wraps. Is this love just motherly? Or is there something here I don't want to admit? Honestly, I'm kind of freaked out by how much I'm questioning myself. There's this whole fight going on in my head. I know I need to push down these feelings, get back to that clear, simple love I'm used to. But alone in the quiet of the night, these tangled emotions keep creeping up, and I don't know how I'll feel. Come morning, I've got to find the strength to hold my ground, to keep things the way they should be. But still, part of me wonders, what if I just let myself feel? Would that be so wrong? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories.